The topic given to me, as John Dayal introduced, is ironical. Human sexuality changing perspectives. An unmarried man is here to speak to an unmarried crowd. And when we have a few married people here, all that I ask of them is, please tell me, you know not what you are speaking of. May God forgive you. And I have a prayer to Kyriakos, Saint Kyriakos, that it will not be long before we have married people here speaking, and at their feet we will sit and listen to their experiences and their wisdom and their spiritual journeys. I hope Kyriakos will get it done very soon for us. There will be overlaps, but I will try to avoid that. I'll just flag a few issues. A few words on human sexuality and sexual ethics. After Vatican II, we are very well aware of a lot of literature that has come about on the goodness and giftedness of sexuality and the great harmony that has been brought about between unitive and procreative purposes. And we also distinguish between the two dimensions of sexuality, genitality and affective relationality. And we know that apart from his teachings to uphold the dignity and equality of women, Saint John Paul II has contributed very richly to the theology of body. All this will have to be taken into consideration, but I'm not going to look at them. We have a lot of struggles that we are confronted with. So in this presentation, after a few comments on current global and Indian context, I shall point to some theological developments that seem to summon us to build a new Catholic sexual ethics, which can be tentatively called an ethic of love that is at once faithful and just. I'm sure most of you have seen this book by Margaret Farley, Just Love, simply Just Love. Because of the title, it got sold and most of the people bought thinking there will be a lot of romantic stuff. It's not, it's a serious theological material. A framework for Christian sexual ethics by Margaret Farley. She's a nun. I am adapting that and rephrasing it. An ethic of love that is at once faithful and just. 2 days ago when I was coming from the airport in the city bus, in the FM radio I heard the anchor say, casual sex can improve sperm quality. The lady went on speaking for a few more minutes, both in English and Kannada, as though she was speaking about a very common topic. Even though she was speaking to the city audience, I suppose it explains and illustrates that sex is no more a taboo topic. The invisibility has gained visibility, silence is broken, and many more people talk of sexuality more confidently and fearlessly. Education, financial resources, change in the self-understanding of oneself, and a host of other factors have made especially women to make decisions in the area of sexuality. So people easily speak of contraceptives and utilizing reproductive technologies, and they are keenly aware of their bodiliness, and the youth are shaped by the cultures and they do shape the culture. People easily speak of premarital sex and cohabitation, homosexuality and lesbianism, rights of the gay and transgenders. We all know how TVs and social media and films contribute to this. In my view, Nirbhaya episode is a watershed event, a kairos moment in Indian history. It amplified the discourse on sexuality in India in an unprecedented way. It exposed a world of patriarchal mindset that informs much of our views. It made many people boldly talk of violence within and outside marriage. Since then, we hear more about rape and marital rape, incest and domestic violence, sexual abuse of children and vulnerable adults, and all kinds of atrocities that go on unnoticed in the area of sexuality. Let's not forget that even though we did not have explicit wars between the traditionalists and liberals like in the West after Humanae Vitae, the Catholic faithful in India too have largely ignored the Church's teachings on contraception, and I suspect on reproductive technologies too, and on other concerns. Declining influence of religious beliefs and teachings in sexual matters, in spite of the catechism, the lessons, the books, the classes, and all that we have, is a major challenge the Indian Church faces as well. Now, the lens or virtue of fidelity which sustained the traditional discourse on sexuality and sexual ethics with the newer questions is seen to be inadequate. People are asking, is it right? Is it just? Who sets the parameters? And who makes the decisions? Who suffers? And why? So these questions pose a new threat, and whether the virtue of fidelity is sufficient a parameter. The synodal documents speak of similar concerns and questions and challenges at the global level. Communion to the divorced and remarried takes a lot of attention, but other issues are not really overlooked. And unfortunately, India has missed a great opportunity, as just John Dayalji has mentioned, that we have failed to use the context of synod to generate a great discussion among the people and among the laity. Now let me flag off a few issues. Where did we get struck, and what's the way out? Charles Curran speaks of 3 ethical models and how they impact how we think and how we make decisions. We are all familiar with these things: deontological, teleological, and relational responsibility models. Deontological model looks to the law. So we have to fulfill. There is an objective. There is a law. There is a duty. Teleological goal looks to the goal, the purpose, the end of life, happiness. And relationality responsibility model, largely drawn from Bernard Herring's works and his own works, Charles Curran's, looking at our ethical discourses from the responsibility and relationality model. And Curran states, Catholic social teachings have adapted sufficiently, and they have moved away from deontological model to relationality model. So we have great Catholic social teachings today. But unfortunately, in the area of sexual ethics and sexuality, we still have an older a classicist understanding of natural law, which is primarily based on deontology, and that constrains the progress and the flourishment of the sexual ethics. So we have a particular understanding of natural law that guides an essential order of human nature is the key that holds a lot of discussions. And here is a major challenge. So we will continue to have this dilemmatic discussion unless we have a breakthrough in the understanding of natural law and whether we can embrace and adapt a law that is more dynamic and personal and not just essentialist. So will the church move as it has moved in other cases and embrace and develop a whole range of sexual ethics? A related issue is the idea of complementarity, which Pope John Paul II developed and advocated very much. It's a great advance, but some see it as a problematic. It again assigns to women a role in accordance with their own nature. Therefore, women can perform something and they cannot go and do something. So the essentialist understanding again is in the complementarity view. So and if we look into ourselves and Indian culture, we use heavily deontology model, and it gets camouflaged in the virtue of fidelity and cultural values, the ideals that we have of ourselves and the women. Women's life is to live with and die with husband at any cost. That's heavily deontological. So we have a duty that she has to perform. Now what about if she has to suffer a great deal in that, in the area of sexual ethics? Margaret Farley, in that book Just Love, puts it simply, and she raises a fundamental question going beyond the criteria of humility. Justice. Are our sexual relations permeated by justice? Justice ought to guide the sexual relations, and this has great relevance for India. The role of social and cultural constructions in our understanding of our body, gender, sexuality, sexual violence, discrimination, and lots of double standards we have in this field. And there are lots of oppressive and repressive gendered, social, and political patterns. Mulayam Singh's famous quotation after that Nirbhaya issue, boys are boys, so just ignore that. So they continue to inform our minds. Male interpretation of female sexual capacities. Male describes who is a female and what is her sexuality and whether she enjoys or not. So these continue to be part of the discourse. And so we have not explored very much what will be the nature of sexual discourse if justice informs this field. Now a question. Do we let people's experiences to inform our theologizing process? The whole bedrock of contextual theology. Pope Francis is doing that very heavily, the way he is drawing upon people's experiences and from the bishops' conferences and their documents. With all the goodwill, I tend to judge here. In India, we teach, we exhort, we guide. But can we also learn and reflect together with the lay people. Let's say we write on the use of reproductive technologies and how unethical they are, but can we listen to the families who have used them and see where they have experienced God's presence in their lives, what were the struggles, and where is God guiding them? And we can write about the natural family planning, how it can be still effective, but can we meet people who have used contraception and see where do they find God in their lives and in their decisions and in their spiritual journeys? We tend to hesitate to ask people to learn from them in these fields. And we can write eloquently on the sacrifices and the patience as incredible virtues and values, and the entire family system depends, and the very survival and flourishing of the families depends on them. But can we listen to those people who suffered injustice, violence, and affirm that at times it may be value and a virtue to squarely oppose and confront it, and that one needs prophetic courage to do that than to submit to a violent husband? Maybe St. Kyriakos Chavara, if he were to be here and listen to a woman who comes home after her husband has abused and beaten her, what will he do? How will he respond? Now imagine a God-fearing, devout father or mother who are worried about this daughter's daughter or the children of that daughter, and how to have that daughter at home. How about the reputation of the house, the family? And how about the marriage of the other daughters at home if this girl stays at home? And who will marry those other people in this house if we have a girl who rebelled against the husband in the house? Will Kyriakos Chavara tell that girl, go back to your husband? This is bringing justice lens into the discourse. It's not simply doing what one likes or allowing things to crumble or to let things have their own way. Justice is to ensure that the relationships are based on mutuality, equality, and dignity, and not on the domination or subjugation of false virtues. I was tempted to think, just to reverse the case and say, if a man came back home from the home and says, my wife is very angry and unbearable, I have come back home, what will the parents tell? What a kind of man you are. Can't you manage your wife? Go and give her a few thrashes and then set her right. Or, don't worry, you are a man, you can always find another woman. That's patriarchy. The way we look at a woman, the way we look at a man and their struggles in the field of sexuality and the marital relations. Bernard Herring, who pioneered in the field of relational ethics, has a lot to contribute again. Can the marriage use relational paradigm to inform the entirety? You have a wonderful article recently published in, this is March 2015, in Asian Horizons, From Sexual Ethics to Relational Ethics, on the debate on sexual morality in the church and theology, by Hilbert Conrad. So he develops using Bernard Herring and the other peoples, and he says, sexual feeling and activity become moral or immoral only insofar as they have to do with respect for the autonomy of the others, trust, understanding and reliance, responsibility for reproduction and good parenthood, justice in the distribution of burdens and duties of the partners. So again, some authors are trying to bring in relational dimension to frame the entire discourse on sexuality, which yesterday we were looking about Descartes' idea, I think therefore I am, I consume therefore I am. We may have to affirm, I relate therefore I am, with Martin Buber. So God, from being a love giver or a judge, have to move to be a loving and a relational, merciful father or a mother. So we give too much emphasis to Moses and his law. We have to recover Abraham, the one who made the covenant, and the relationality in that covenantal dimension has to have greater bearing on these things. Now, synodal churning on sexual ethics, Sagara Mathanam. So much is happening in synod, and obviously the synod's focus is on family and how to strengthen the very idea and the institution of the family, and how to bring in God's grace into the reality of the family. But sexual ethics seems to get a lot of attention. Now, debates, there is so much is happening, and I would like to just hint a couple of things. Will a lot of things change? We don't know, let's wait. But what's happening? There are debates and discussions to speak out. the Pope Francis has changed a lot of the very understanding of theology and the discourse by allowing people to discuss, to debate. It has great theological implications. He asked the cardinals to speak out boldly, clearly, publish all that is going on in the conversations. This is a theological shift. And consult, a big thing. Ask the people for their views, to share their experiences, to have, as in the words of Gaudium et Spes, opening line, the joys and hopes and the anxieties and the fears of the people. Let's listen to them. Let's listen to their dreams. This is a theological matter. We need to listen. We need to learn. We do not know everything. So methodologically, it's a very significant move. The magisterium is to listen and to learn as well as teaching. And the style of the language itself, there is a lot that is written about that. Pope Francis, the style itself is the substance and the way he speaks and the language he chooses and all that. So he speaks the Bahasha, the language of the people, like Buddha brought in Prakrit or Pali in a prophetic way to let people know what is happening. Francis has brought that language. Let people know and understand what we are talking about. And he draws the resources from the periphery. Look at the footnotes in Laudato Si and Vedia Places, and the way he refers to the simple people and his encounters with the people, and he brings them into his discourses. And challenges for the future. At two levels, at the level of teaching and at the level of truth. At the level of teaching, we will have this difficulty. The unalterable nature of Jesus' teachings, whether in divorce or understanding of marriage or sexuality, that will be a major issue that the church has to struggle and deal with. And the second one is the idea of truth, the notion of truth. Truth of God, truth of the human person, the anthropology that we hold, and that which heavily is built on and draws upon the natural law understanding that's classicist. Will things change? Will there be some breakthrough in these areas? Coming to the hopes, there's a lot of hope. His focus on the nature of the church of the poor and the ministries and the ministers, and the role of joy and mercy will have a lot of implications on sexual ethics. One thing is no blanket judgment. Do not judge and do not fear that you will be judged. This is a huge contribution of the Pope. And he's trying to build a participatory model of the church. We all belong here. And he empowers the pastors to find solutions locally. So this might be a big thing that as an implication after the synod. And we can talk and we can have differences and still we can belong together. We need to listen and to learn. God speaks to the people and to their experiences. So there's a lot that is happening. Let me just quote a couple of things some of the cardinals and bishops are saying. Cardinal Marx of Munich, who is one of the G8, says, Pope Francis wants to break new ground. This is in the context of the synod when they were speaking about what's happening. But he wants to do that so together with the bishops who must be united. So that's where is the opportunity and the challenge. And he also said the church had a huge backlog and great deal of catching up to do to achieve a democratic culture of debate. Cardinal Maradiaga, the head of G8 from Honduras, a Salesian cardinal, he's speaking about Cardinal Mueller. He says, he's a German, and one has to say, as a German theology professor, so in his mind there is only truth and falsehood. But I say, my brother, he's speaking to Cardinal Mueller, the world isn't like this, and you should be a little more flexible when you hear other voices. That means not just listening and then saying no. And Maradiaga tells to Cardinal Mueller, I hope one day Mueller will arrive at understanding of other positions too. And the head of the Bishops' Conference of Switzerland says, the
Father
church must grapple with the continuing
maybe just one more minute.
Yes. So they are all looking forward to some changes. And one word from the Pope. This is from the Face of Mercy. If God limited himself to only justice, he would cease to be God and would instead be like human beings who ask merely that the law be respected. And then he has this wonderful line. In this Jubilee year, let's allow God to surprise us. The church feels the urgent need to proclaim God's mercy. Her life is authentic and credible only when she becomes convincing herald of mercy. She knows that her primary task, especially at the moment full of great hopes and contradictions, is to introduce everyone to the great mystery of God's mercy by contemplating on the face of Christ. So let's hope during this Jubilee year and at the Synod, there will be surprises from God to each of us. Thank you.